The 20th of April, 1945. The Second World War was coming to an end. The final bombs of the Allied victory echoed through Berlin. The final solution echoes throughout the world. 6 million Jews dead. The survivors left a document shattering inhumanity. The man responsible for mass murder was still alive. Adolf Hitler celebrated his 56th birthday in a concrete bunker. Hitler's aides urged him to move official documents and his personal effects to a secret location in the mountains of southern Germany. There, the Nazis planned to set up a new command center if Berlin fell. Hitler agreed, and 10 German planes filled with secret cargo escaped the Allied forces. But only 9 planes reached their destination. When Hitler learned which plane was missing, he called it a catastrophe. It was the plane containing his personal archive, papers, letters, notes, and perhaps his private diaries. The roadmap of Adolf Hitler's mind had vanished into a cloud of mystery. 1 week later, Hitler committed suicide. Hope for understanding how he thought appeared to die with him. But almost immediately, there were whispers about that lost plane and the fact that Hitler's diaries were on board. If the diaries could be found, then perhaps Hitler's own words would explain his madness and give Germany the answers they were desperately seeking in the rubble of the Second World War.
German people, they wanted to know who was Hitler, what was his private life, what were her thoughts before he went to bed, what did he write down in his diary. And this was the chance, the one and only chance, to find out what was Hitler.
But where was that plane? Did it crash? Had wind scattered pages across the war-torn landscape? Or had they been stolen from the wreckage? The Hitler diaries could not be found, and hope turned to rumor. The diaries remain the missing key to the mind of a dictator and the nation drawn into his delusion.
We try hard to find explanations, and from time to time we can't find any answer. To understand why the whole country was quiet in the moment when 6 million Jews were killed, till today I can't understand. And this is the most crucial question for young Germans. What would have you done during this time? On which side you were you quiet, accepting, or in opposition? There's a desperate look for answers. People would have hoped to find some answers in the Hitler diaries.
But in early post-war Germany, there were no diaries and there were no answers. Even after the Nuremberg trials condemned the worst of those still left alive. Many fled to South America or disappeared into their own underground network. A few aging Nazis melted into polite society by hiding their past.
The Holocaust was so terrible that the only chance for Germany to go on living for the people who were involved into this crime was to lie about it.
The swastika became an illegal emblem in Germany. Public displays of Nazi memorabilia were outlawed. The word Hitler and what it stood for became part of the language. But then, beginning in the early 1970s, a small but vocal group of German baby boomers, young adults who did not carry the guilt of their parents' generation, began to force a confrontation with history. It was called Hitlerwelle, or the Hitler Wave. A new generation resurrected Hitler in books, films, and memorabilia. Overpriced copies of Mein Kampf sold out. Documentaries were made, including one with Eva Braun's home movies of Hitler. And Germany's most popular magazine serialized what they claimed to be the definitive Hitler biography. Adolf Hitler, dead for 30 years, became a money spinner. His signature sold for just over £600. A lock of Eva Braun's hair, £2,100. Whether the new frenzy was fueled by greed, morbid curiosity, or shameless idolatry is a question no one can answer. In 1973, the Karin II, the private yacht of General Hermann Goering, Hitler's Nazi Air Force strategist, sold for £40,000. The buyer was Gerd Heidemann, a photojournalist for Stern magazine. Stern was Germany's most widely read news and entertainment weekly, and Heidemann had been assigned to nearly all of Stern's coverage of the Hitler Welle. But when he bought the Karin II, colleagues at Stern began to wonder, is Gerd Heidemann making a shrewd business investment, or has he been seduced by his Nazi contacts?
He was interested in finding out the truth. He was interested in producing scoop by scoop by scoop and producing stuff for good stories for Stern.
In 1976, Heidemann compulsively restored the Karin II. He furnished it with Goering's private dinner service, teacups, goblets, and ashtrays. Goering's Nazi dress uniform was displayed like a sacred object.
He has never the feeling, the sensibility to see when I buy the yacht of Goering and when I collect Nazi items, this is something which is very, very unpopular in Germany.
The Karin II became a shrine for surviving Nazis who gathered on board like war heroes to relive history and tell their secrets to Heidemann, wear their swastikas, and toast allegiance to a dead man. If Gerd Heidemann, as he claimed, was just a journalist on assignment, by 1979, the Nazis believed he was one of them.
If you talk with him and if you look on his life, he's absolutely not a Nazi, 100% not. But he, as with all his things, he can't evaluate what he's doing.
In 1979, in the company of Nazi sympathizers, Heidemann heard a startling rumor. At least one volume of Hitler's diaries had been found. (1980), the peak of Hitler Welle. Young Germany's renewed fascination with the demons of old. It was also the dawn of checkbook journalism. The two were about to collide, causing an explosive chain reaction around the globe. In January 1980, in Stuttgart, Gerd Heidemann met Fritz Stiefel, a wealthy collector of Nazi memorabilia. Heavy doors closed on Heidemann as he entered the inner sanctum of Stiefel's private memorial to Adolf Hitler.
Stiefel started to show to Heidemann his Nazi collection and showed the pictures and the letters and the postcards. Then he showed the diary.
Heidemann, surrounded by swastikas, was handed a small leather-bound book filled with handwritten pages in a very distinctive scrawl. For Heidemann, the collector, it was the Holy Grail, a volume from Hitler's missing diaries. For Heidemann, the journalist, it was the story of a lifetime. He asked Stiefel where the diary came from, but Stiefel was cagey. So Heidemann tried to uncover the source himself. He found an obscure book entitled Hitler's Pilot, the memoirs of General Hans Buhr. Buhr had organized the airlift of Hitler's private papers during the chaotic last days of the war. In Buhr's book, Heidemann found a reference to a plane crash in the East German village of Bornersdorf. There, he found the graves of the two pilots assigned to ferry Hitler's personal archive.
Mr. Heidemann, through whom or in what manner did you ever receive any indication that there might be such things as Hitler's diaries?
We learned from some farmers in Bornersdorf that many Wehrmacht documents had been salvaged from the wreck and had been stowed away in surrounding barns until they were finally taken to the West.
Heidemann first reported his discovery to his editor of 26 years, Henry Nannen, the charismatic journalist and founder of Stern magazine. Nannen accused Heidemann of being a Nazi propaganda peddler and gave him a definite no. So Heidemann went over Nannen's head to Manfred Fischer, managing director of Gruner & Jahr, the company that owns Stern. In a closed-door meeting with Fischer and a few hand-picked associates, Heidemann told them he had found the greatest prize of the Third Reich, a volume of Hitler's secret diaries.
Fischer was impressed. He said, "A wonderful story, we do it." Of course, it was a top secret action then, and every one of them felt that we have the century scoop. Hitler's diaries found now. I think in this moment they start to become, they get the bunker mentality.
Now Heidemann had a partner with enough money to buy the diary from the collector, and enough money to pay himself a finder's fee when the diary was delivered.
With the power of the CEO Fischer, it was absolutely no problem, because Heidemann was in contact with Stiefel, asking Stiefel from whom you got this diary. And Stiefel said, from Professor Fischer.
Professor Fischer turned out to be a small-time art dealer and Nazi memorabilia collector in Stuttgart. Heidemann needed to meet this professor.
Well, what shall I say? I worked, made paintings, sold paintings. I created a large company which made a lot of money. And then came Heidemann.
The professor told Heidemann that he had sold one volume of Hitler's diaries to Stiefel. Then the bombshell. He told Heidemann he could get his hands on 27 more volumes of Hitler's secret diaries. How many did Heidemann want?
He asked for a lot of money, and for Heidemann it was no problem. You can imagine, you can remember the story. Then Heidemann was brought to the CEO Fischer and asked for the money, and Fischer said, "No problem, sir."
The professor demanded just over £60,000 up front and another £24,000 for every volume of the diaries he delivered. And he warned that this deal would take time, since each volume was hidden in a different location inside East Germany. But the professor sweetened the deal by offering for immediate delivery a collection of strange personal effects from his private Hitler collection. Manfred Fischer and Gerd Heidemann agreed.
Beim Heidemann ist hier hinten ein kleines Männchen drin. Und immer wenn
But of course, Heidemann has a little man in the back of his head. And whenever he sees a swastika, he jumps up and goes nuts. You know, I have to tell you one thing. When a man buys Hitler's ashes from me, as well as the ashes of Eva Braun, and then snorts them in front of me, snorts them up his nose, then he belongs in the loony bin, not with a newspaper.
Stern magazine was at the mercy of a man of unknown ethics, background, and vague occupation.
Da gibt's keinen Spaß. Die wollen
Nobody collects out of pleasure. All they want is money.
To avoid revealing his hand and opening up the diaries to the highest bidder, Manfred Fischer decided not to reveal the discovery until he had the complete 27-volume set. For 2 years, between 1980 and 1982, Heidemann and the professor met every 2 months, always alone, in out-of-the-way places. In dark cellar bars, they shared a drink. In the shadows, the professor whispered stories of the journey each volume had traveled, smuggled in a piano, thrown from a speeding car. Each story was more imaginative than the last, and always dangerous.
Why would informants be placed in any sort of danger? They simply made public certain documents which came to them by pure coincidence.
Okay, but I made a promise to them. We've always protected our informants and will continue to do so. It's a promise I'll keep. It's a promise I'll keep.
Professor Fischer left each meeting with a briefcase filled with money. Heidemann, the go-between, returned to Stern with volumes of Hitler's secret diaries.
It was like a ceremony to open these diary and to look into the pages, like, you know, the spirit of the century.
Each volume of the diaries was hand-delivered to a secret bank vault in Zurich, Switzerland. As the 27th and last volume was about to be delivered, Manfred Fischer prepared to publish. But the professor had a surprise for Heidemann. There weren't 27 volumes. There were 67. And to get those, Stern would have to pay even more money. After more than 2 years, the payoffs totaled almost £2.5 million. Stern had too much invested to wait any longer. They decided they would reveal the existence of Hitler's diaries on April the 22nd, 1983, the 38th anniversary of the crash that scattered the diaries. Publication would follow a week later. With the deadline just 4 months away, pages from the diaries were finally tested for authenticity. There was unbearable tension as Stern management prepared for publication and waited for test results from Ordway Hilton, the most prominent handwriting analyst in the United States.
In my opinion, it is genuine writing of his.
Chemists from the German state police confirmed that their preliminary analysis suggested the diaries did contain ink and paper from the war years. Despite warnings from the Federal Archive that more tests needed to be performed before they could absolutely authenticate the diaries, Stern began to sell international rights. The reported price? Almost £2 million. To bolster the legitimacy of the diaries and generate pre-publication interest, Stern invited Barbara Dickmann, Germany's most respected television presenter, to a private meeting where she was sworn to secrecy.
Sign a letter that I never talk about that, what I will hear in the next half an hour. Never. And I didn't believe it. I said, are you sure? And all the people, they said, you can be sure because we have proved it, everything is correct, we found it, and we paid a lot of money for the diaries of Hitler. So they asked me to do a film about these Hitler diaries.
In March 1983, Dickmann was contracted to produce a film about the Hitler diaries, one that would be viewed in millions of German households on the day of publication, then just 3 weeks away. Barbara Dickmann's name alone was worth millions, and now she was owned by Stern. Dickmann traveled with a camera crew and Gerd Heidemann across Germany, and she quickly came to realize that her primary source was a man losing touch with reality.
We were on the way to do the film, and from day to day, more. My impression was growing. He is crazy. He is really crazy, sick. There must be a doctor to keep him and take him away. There was a break in my film. I traveled back to Hamburg and was right away going to the chief, Mr. Koch, and I told him, Mr. Heidemann is crazy. But he said to me, the diaries are real. So I started again to work with him and to make the film. He was very nervous. He was drinking too much. He was walking around. He was whispering to me. When he was talking about Hitler and his diaries, he always starts to whisper to me, even if nobody was around. You know, he whispered.
Dickmann remembers an increasingly erratic and paranoid Heidemann.
He was moving a cabinet away, and behind this cabinet there was a door. And he opened the door, and behind the door was a collection of crazy things. The underwear of Idi Amin, a dirty underwear under a glass, you know. He had the uniforms from Hitler, and he had funny things. And he was whispering again like a crazy type. And he told me, look, Bob, this is from Hitler. And he showed me underwear from Eva Braun. And he told me, nobody had ever seen it, just me. And he shows it only people who he can trust, you know. And I said, Heidemann, you are crazy. Do you know that? And he said, I know I'm crazy because I found all these things. The world didn't see it. I found it. And I collected just for me.
What makes you so sure that the diaries are authentic, that this is not a forgery?
First, because I have found additional important documents. Second, because we've given the diaries to the most renowned examiners in the world. Not only was the handwriting tested, but also the paper, the ink, as well as the development of the writing over the years. I mean, what else can you do?
The one person whom Barbara Dickmann did not interview was the mysterious Professor Fischer. Heidemann kept him an anonymous player in the unfolding drama of the diaries.
I was only interested in the money, because what else am I going to do? I only wanted to get at the money of other people.
While the documentary was being filmed, Rupert Murdoch, owner of The Times, agreed to buy the international publishing rights to the diaries if he could bring in his own experts to authenticate them. Murdoch insisted on Hugh Trevor Roper, world-renowned Hitler expert and head of the history department at Oxford. Trevor Roper was flown to Zurich on April the 8th, 1983, and was told that he would have as much time as he needed to examine the actual diaries and study their contents.
That's not quite what happened. When I was actually about to get into the car to go to the airport, the telephone rang, and it was the editor of the Times, and he said, would I please give my decision that afternoon after seeing the papers? And I said, this is impossible.
2 weeks before Stern's target publication date, Hugh Trevor Roper entered the bank vault in Switzerland where Stern magazine had placed the diaries for safekeeping. Trevor Roper held in his hands the diary of a man he had studied most of his professional life.
There was a sort of air of mystification about the whole thing, the kind of aura of protective secrecy. When I came to see them, I was rather skeptical. When I saw them, I was very surprised, first, at the sheer bulk of them, and I felt at once that these could not be forged. There was one absolutely key link on which it all depended. The part of the story which concerned the intermediary who had rescued the papers from the crashed airplane and had kept them till now in secrecy. I asked his identity, and I was told that he had made a very strict condition that his identity was not to be revealed.
Trevor Roper's contact at Stern was a middle-level manager named Peter Koch.
I said, if you can't reveal the identity of this person, can you vouch for him? Can you first tell me whether you actually met him? Whether you yourself know who he is? And he said yes. And have you actually met him? Yes. And can you vouch for him? Yes. Those were concrete answers to concrete questions. Well, so I went back to my hotel, and almost immediately the telephone rang, and it was the editor of the Times pressing me for an answer. So I said, from the evidence I have seen, I think that they are genuine. That was my mistake.
From Hamilton.
Heidemann called me one night. With the difference in time zones, it was 1:30 in the morning at my place. He told me he was in New York, has just received an affidavit that the diaries are absolutely authentic. So I didn't say anything, put down the receiver, and thought to myself, either the examiners are all nuts or they're good for nothings. Or, and that's when I pinched myself. Maybe I am Hitler.
It's April the 15th, 1983. Publication of the first installment of the Hitler Diaries in Germany's largest magazine is only 1 week away. What Stern does not know, or claims not to know, as they enter the 11th hour, is that the mysterious Professor Fischer is really Konrad Kujau, a con artist and art forger with a long police record.
Kujau was a brilliant forger. He's a brilliant man. You know, he lies any day, 100%. He's a storyteller, you know, a narrator, someone who's with a beautiful sense of humor. But there's not even one drop of truth.
Kujau is taking Stern's money without scruples or hesitation.
What was there to think about? Nothing. So I went to look for a place where I could find some documentation. In order to create a forgery, you have to slip into the personality of the person to be forged.
It is a task uniquely suited to the talents and personality of Konrad Kujau.
He doesn't have to take breath just to write Hitler's handwriting. He could do it. If you could do it and someone walked to you and say, oh, please, I saw you some diaries. Could we buy them for millions of marks? What would you do? What you've done? Of course, well, start writing diaries.
Warum habe ich die Tagebücher gemacht? War Heidemann
Why did I make these diaries? Because Heidemann offered me $2 million. $2 million is a lot of money, man. What do you think? I delivered the diaries, I got my money. I provided a good product, I got good money. Done deal.
But what history has still not answered is this. Was Gerd Heidemann simply an intermediary for Stern, Kuyao's pawn, or a co-conspirator in the publishing story of the century?
Tagebuch falsch ist.
I maintain that Heidemann knew from the beginning that the diaries were not authentic.
But at the time, 1 week before German publication, the world knows nothing of the mysterious Professor Fischer, his love of forgery, or even in fact that Hitler's so-called secret diaries have been found. So Kuyao continues his work, confident that if he hasn't been caught by now, he probably never will be.
Ich wusste ja nicht, was damit passiert mit dem Bücher.
What I wrote in there is all true. It comes out of history. What have I done? I took 600 books, 1,200 newspapers and existing files, and I put together Hitler's daily schedule. I knew exactly when Hitler had a toothache, I knew when he had diarrhea or the flu.
Ist natürlich sehr unwahrscheinlich, dass jemand.
It is unlikely that someone holding such a document in their custody would be unaware of its value, both historical and material. What was the motive of your informants to keep the diaries hidden for such a long time, almost 40 years?
Sie hatten erstens keinen Grund, damit an die Öffentlichkeit zu gehen. Dann hätten sie sich ja selbst.
They had no reason to come forward with the documents. They would have had to identify themselves. Only at my urging to bring the diaries to light, and conditional upon my promise not to identify these people, did they finally agree to give them to me.
Early on Thursday, April the 21st, 1983, Stern holds a press conference to announce its discovery of the Hitler diaries. Barbara Dickman's documentary is broadcast.
Nun geben Sie sie aber preis.
Now you are making them public.
Only the books, not the informants. I'm also not endangering the letter because I will not answer you.
Things quickly begin to unravel. Just as the diaries make headlines around the world, the German Federal Archive tells Stern the results of their final analysis. The diaries are a forgery. There are whiteners in the paper and polyester in the blood-red cord that decorates each diary. Stern magazine refuses to stop the presses, because presses are rolling in London too. The scoop has taken on a life of its own. On April the 23rd, The Times publishes a front-page article hyping their publication of Hitler's secret diaries the following day. There is an accompanying editorial by Hugh Trevor Roper confirming that the diaries are real. Trevor Roper is aghast. The Times had promised not to release the editorial until after he'd had a chance to interview Gerd Heidemann.
As time passed, I started having doubts about Heidemann. I came to the conclusion that there was something fishy about the whole thing.
Ironically, on the day his Times editorial is published, Trevor Roper is in Stuttgart trying to interview Heidemann. He is invited by Stern to attend the next morning's press conference to herald the authenticity of the diaries as the first installment hits German newsstands.
I said I absolutely refused to go unless I had the opportunity of interrogating Heidemann.
Reluctantly, Stern arranges an interview. Trevor Roper is the first person outside Stern allowed to question Heidemann directly.
He was very evasive. I asked specific questions about time, place, etc. And he got visibly cross. Finally, I said to him over some point that this conflicted with the evidence given to me by Herr Koch. And at that he lost his temper. And he said, Herr Koch knows nothing. He knows nothing except what I tell him. And that was a terrible giveaway, that Heidemann was the man who was in charge, not Koch. Koch had taken everything from Heidemann and repeated it to me as if it was his, from his own personal knowledge. And I regarded Koch as a responsible professional editor who was to be trusted. If it had come in the first instance direct from Heidemann, I would have had very different views about it. He had no reputation to lose. At that point, I was convinced that the whole structure of evidence which supported the documents had foundered.
It's Saturday, April the 23rd. Trevor Roper calls the Times and tells them he has serious doubts that the diaries are real. There is still time to stop the presses, but Murdoch reportedly says, "Damn him, publish. We're in the entertainment business." Next day, excerpts from the transcripts of Hitler's diaries appear in the Sunday Times. In Germany, 2 million copies of Part 1 of Hitler's secret diaries hit the newsstands. The public queues up, anxious for words that will explain the man so many followed so blindly. It's a sellout, a disturbing sensation.
When I prepared the film, I didn't know what was in the diaries. Nobody told me. And I heard about, like everybody else in Germany, when the Star magazine came out on this historical Monday. And I was shocked because it was a lot of nonsense, Hitler wrote in his diary, "Eva Braun had a stomach attack this morning, and she smells bad." But the important and the bad things in this diaries were that Hitler was not knowing about the conference where they decided to kill all the Jewish people. And that Hitler was not the bad man, that the bad men were the people around him. They pushed him in. That Hitler was a good guy, you know. It's unbelievable that Star magazine management people, they wrote, they read all what was in these diaries, that they believed it, that they still believe that it's true, that it's serious. I can't believe it. It was just trash what was written in this diary.
But once again, Adolf Hitler was capturing the attention of the world. The Hitler of the forger's imagination is not the man responsible for genocide or the screeching tyrant of the newsreels. The monster of the Third Reich speaks in the voice of an ordinary man. That afternoon, 200 reporters were expected to attend a Stern press conference to launch the international serialization of the complete set of Hitler's secret diaries. Leaks and rumors about the diaries' authenticity and controversy over the contents had created a sideshow of speculation. The world awaited the most anticipated press conference in Germany's history. If you'd like to know more. The audience of photographers and reporters wait as historian Hugh Trevor Roper rises to the podium to speak.
At the press conference, I did in fact say that the burden of proof was on Stern, that the genuineness had not been proved, that the evidence which had been produced for their genuineness had, in my opinion, collapsed.
There is chaos. News reports instantly savage the reputations of Stern magazine, Trevor Roper, and Gerd Heidemann. Stern calls it all a rush to judgment and insists the diaries are real. Immediately after the press conference, the director of research at the German Federal Archive calls Stern's executive board. He demands to know why the magazine has not made the archive's negative authentication report public. But while this is happening, people all over the world are clamoring for copies of Stern. So, defiantly, Stern publishes the second installment of the Hitler Diaries in their next issue on May the 4th, 1983. The next day, disgusted government officials from the Federal Archive bypass Stern management and speak directly to the German public. They call the Hitler Diaries a grotesque and superficial forgery. Gerd Heidemann hears the news on his car radio.
I barely managed to keep my foot on the gas pedal and kept thinking, best to hit the pillars of the next overpass, then the whole thing will be over for you.
Heidemann, after it turned out that those Hitler diaries are a fake, is calling Kujau. He was desperate and say, till this moment, Professor Fischer, what could we do? Those diaries are fake. And Kujau, not even in this moment, said then to Heidemann, excuse me, I was it.
I was bitter. All this nice work undone. I could have continued to forge Hitler for another 5 years. I would have made good money. In the beginning, I wasn't admitting anything. I was lying. Only when they found a signature of Hitler on my drawing pad in my basement did I know I was stuck, and I had to confess. I mean, I couldn't say that Hitler was in my basement, so I said, okay.
Barbara Dickman hears the news in Italy as she is preparing to host a banquet.
It was a shock. Everybody was quiet. Nobody said a word. I was sitting there and the tears came out. Even the men around me, they started crying. We put the arms around together, and said, this is the end of our career. This is really the end. What to do? I said, I can't go back to Germany. My heart, it stopped banging. It was, I couldn't breathe anymore. It was a shock.
Dickman leaves Stern, a laughingstock for her unwitting collaboration. She will never again achieve the level of journalistic respect she once commanded. Hugh Trevor Roper salvages his reputation by admitting that his examination of the diaries had been too hasty.
I stated publicly that I made a mistake, but I did think that the other people who contributed to this debacle would admit their responsibility too, but not one of them did. They all turned on me.
Stern does not publish a third installment of the diaries. They press criminal charges against Heidemann for fraud when they discover he has stolen just over £600,000, earmarked for the diaries. Only journalist Maurice Philip Remy defends Gerd Heidemann as a journalist unfairly trapped by circumstantial evidence.
I'm 100% convinced, after all our research, Heidemann doesn't know that these diaries are fake. The only one who does know that these diaries are fake, of course, are Professor Fischer, alias Kujau.
Konrad Kujau is charged with forgery. Both Kujau and Heidemann are held in custody for more than a year before their trial.
Heidemann in his cell still believes in Fischer Kujau. And you know what Kujau has done? Wrote in the handwriting of Hitler, wrote, I was the faker of the Hitler diaries, with sincerely yours, Kujau Fischer. And this was brought to Heidemann in his cell. It was the first moment Heidemann understood what really happened. Can you imagine this? Bitter. Bitter.
Heidemann is sentenced to 4 years, 8 months in prison. Kujau to 4 years, 6 months.
Wissen Sie, ihr müsst jetzt eins überlegen.
You've got to consider this. The Stern was misled by the examiners. I would have dragged them all to court. They're all morons, eggheads. If they hadn't said the diaries are real, there wouldn't have been a scandal. Those are the true culprits, not me. But they condemned me and Heidemann. And the examiners, the sleazebags, and the good-for-nothings, the total zeros, they were let go with their money.
The bad guys are the responsible people in the Star magazine, because I can't expect from people with this responsibility in a magazine like the Star, even if they paid 10 million marks, when they find out that the books are not real, that they stop it and put it into the trash. And I am sure, personally, that they knew it before they came out. I'm quite sure.
If you go on, and feel yourself like really on the way of success, and you smell the money and you smell the glory, then it's dangerous.
Barbara Dickman is still outraged at the contents of the diaries. To be clear about her feelings, she makes her final remarks in German.
Eine geschichtliche Tragödie, finde ich. Es war nicht nur eine
This wasn't just a hoax for the press. It was an historic tragedy. That Germany can publicly announce to the world Hitler is not a bad man, that's the tragedy. And that many believed it immediately. That's the tragedy for me and for Germany as well, I believe.
In 1999, Heidemann is a ruined man, still claiming innocence and betrayal. That the money he was convicted of stealing is in the hands of Konrad Kujau. But Kujau prospers. While still behind bars, he sold Hitler's signature and mastered the styles of Picasso, Rembrandt, and Van Gogh. Today, he is a millionaire, the most famous and sought-after forger in the world, a painter still mixing shades of truth.
We are the knight of the media. for me, a modern type of Night of the Media, producing any day, any week, new stories. And we journalists, we love those stories, you know. If someone is funny and gives you really meat for your story, we prefer them, those type of people. It's very easy with a good story to hoax the public and to hoax the press and media. I strongly believe that they aren't interested in the truth. I think they are interested in a good story. They like to be entertained. That's it. Entertainment, not truth.
Entertainment, not truth. It's a phrase that will continue to echo in an age of checkbook journalism. Entertain first, ask questions later. It can lead people down a very twisted path.
Tomorrow at the same time, there's a new series, Treasure, going in search of long-lost hoards of booty around the world. In the first programme, the piratical secrets of Port Royal, otherwise known as Sin City, Jamaica.